Who, I would also like to hear from others if this was a shared idea. I mean, Ayush has expressed his thoughts about this topic. What does anyone else think about it? How did those words of Master affect you? How active is that thought in your life? Can I coax anyone to comment?
It's a goal, but you keep doubting it's possible.
Right.
So, I'd like to know the way.
When you doubt it's possible, does that make you sad, or is it in the forefront of your mind? I mean, how do you relate to that thought?
Doubts that I'm not good enough to become a Jeevan.
Right. So what does that mean, good enough? I'm not challenging you, I'm actually curious.
Yeah. I don't really know,
Okay.
but that probably means that those who become are better than me.
Better than you? Well, that's a pretty simple definition of good enough.
I'm not sure how I'm not good enough,
but that's the feeling that you have inside of you.
Yeah, doubts.
Doubt of self. Not doubt of the possibility, but doubt that it's possible for me.
For me.
So we're not doubting Master's promise, we're just thinking it may not apply to me.
Right.
Anyone else?
It's a shared aspiration.
Say again?
It's a common shared aspiration amongst us. It's me, all of us, to about the efficacy of Kriya. I'm not doubting the same,
Right.
but considering each levels of each one has its own spiritual debris, as they call it, and is it within the realm of possibility through Kriya we can do this?
So it's not doubting Kriya, but it's doubting me and Kriya.
Yeah, my debris.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
I think personally, I feel it is attainable. Like if Master says it's doable, it's doable. But for me, when I read a lot of lives of saints and how they've led it, and some of it seems rather extreme, I feel like, do we all have to kind of go that way? I mean, do we have to live like that? Because in some ways, what Swamiji would do would be like, I'd be like, I don't know, like, do I have to be this way? I mean, it's always so perfect, always so right. What's the harm in a white lie? Like, I mean, sometimes I just wonder, I mean, if it makes a person feel good, why shouldn't we say a few white lies?
Right. Fair question. That's a fair question. That's an honest answer. That's what I'm actually looking for. It's really what people really and genuinely think and feel. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, and on the same lines, when we're living in the life, we're living everything, we're not like the sadhus living in the Himalayas. So we have to go through loads of distractions in our day-to-day life. How do we stay that focused on what we're doing through the day?
Right.
It's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy at all. Anyone else?
I too am in business.
Uh-huh.
And I'm dealing with financial advisory. So a lot of money and a lot of materiality is involved. So again, I find it very difficult to then pull myself out of that in the evening and then get back into the meditation mood. So
right.
How does one tackle that also? If you can give a few words on that.
All right. I'm still waiting if there's more. I don't want to cut discussion too soon. Yeah. Okay. I've never ever in my life expected to become a Jivan Mukta. I've never paid any attention to that promise. I never felt it applied to me. Partly because I lived with Swamiji. And the difference between him and me was so dramatic that it just was inconceivable to me that I could extricate myself from all my desires sufficiently to live at the stage of self-control and freedom that was natural to him. I just watched myself continuously behave in ways that were so different. Now, you can look at my life from the other end. You know, I became a devotee when I was 18. I met Swami at 22. At 20, just before I turned 24, I moved to the ashram. I had absolutely nothing. I never looked back. I never doubted, I never hesitated. So on one hand, my life looks fairly free on that side. But on the other side of it, I saw what real spiritual freedom looked like. And it's not that I feel badly about who I am in any way at all. I mean, everyone always thinks they could do better, and the feeling of incompleteness is what Maya does to us. I mean, that's precisely Maya's primary trick, is to make us feel uncomfortable within who we are. And God knows, I battled enormous insecurities for most of my life, so it wasn't like I had contentment. But on the other hand, it seemed obvious to me that I was doing the best that I could. And in a very positive sense, and this is also because of my friendship with Swamiji, I had a woman come to me once and she talked to me about how she doubted that God loved her, which is a very painful position to be in. And I did my best to try to reassure her, but why would she take my word for it? I just did the best I could. But after she left, I started thinking about it, because I had a lot of insecurities, but I've never doubted that God loved me, ever. And I realized it was because of what I'd experienced of unconditional love from Swamiji. And because of that level of being seen as a spiritual person, I mean, not necessarily as a saint or anything. I mean, he was very sweet, You could bring him a nice cup of tea and he would say, "Oh, you're an angel." But he didn't really mean you're an angel in the true full meaning of the word. But he was supportive like that, but it was much deeper than that. Is that he just believed in us. And it wasn't even just love. And it wasn't personal. So, I can say that, and it could make you all feel bad because you may not have experienced it, but it wasn't personal. It was that he believed in all of us, and he loved all of us, and he knew that all of us would succeed. But that never translated into my mind that I would never have another body, or that I had no more karma to work out, because common sense told me that I did. And so, between what Master said was theoretically possible and what I actually felt, given my own knowledge of myself and my attachments and my fears and my longings and all the things that I have had and still have, it just looked to me like I wasn't going to be lucky enough to get rid of them. But the other side of that to me was, how much longer could it be? It can't be much longer, because given the degree of dedication, even to find ourselves on this path as serious disciples, it's like, this is a very, very advanced path. Most people are not interested in this path. In our temple, I was so amused by this woman who came. She came our Sunday morning satsangs are our main public event. She came a couple of times, and then at the end, when she was sort of saying, we were greeting each other, she said, I've been to a lot of spiritual groups in this area because it's a candy store, as Swami said, of options. She said, they all talk about overcoming the ego, but I'm beginning to think you all actually mean it. And she actually didn't come back. Because it's one thing to talk about it. It's quite another to be face to face with yourself and have to deal with it. So, to my way of thinking, and I've actually had serious arguments with my friends on this point. I mean, really arguments with my friends. And every so often I put this on a recording that goes out in the public, and I actually get emails. Basically, You're going to undermine the faith of everyone if you say that you don't think you can become a Jivan Mukta. And then they say to me, Swami said we should be Jivan Muktas. Master said we should be Jivan Muktas. Basically, how dare you not go along with what they said? My answer is, Swami was the Jivan Mukta. He looked really different than me. He just really looked different than me. And I don't want to live in a dream. I mean, I know what power he had to overcome himself, to put himself aside, to transcend, physical imperatives, to forgive in the face of betrayal, to be calm in the face of challenge. And I'm not like that. I'm a million times better than I was when I started. The greatness of being as old as I am is that I can see, Mount Everest of change in myself. But that still, the distance between me and Swami is still really broad. But that doesn't mean that I repudiate the possibility. It just means that I don't understand how it could happen. That doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means I don't understand it. It's a teaching that's too subtle for me. Last night in the Satsang, somebody in the far back corner said he wanted to know more about moksha. My answer to him was, so do I. I mean, there's a huge difference between words and actually being able to perceive a reality. And I have to be honest with myself, and I'm just proposing all of this to you because when I heard the topic, I said to both of them, oh dear. I mean, I just surrendered my whole program to everybody in India, partly because I don't have the DNA anymore to make plans for myself very well. I did decades of planning, and now it's just like all the karma's run out. So I just said, you all just tell me what I'm supposed to do. So if I surrender control, I can't protest. But now let me think what I was going to say for a second. Oh, where was I starting before I went there? It's not that I don't think it's possible. It's that I don't. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It's just like I think it's necessary. And this is the delicate art of the spiritual path. Many years ago, in America, in the 70s especially, when all of this Eastern teaching and meditation was just flooding, the New Age movement was really launching. It launched basically from San Francisco, which is where we were. And there was an article that came out, and it was called The Dark Side of Meditation, which was an intriguing, I don't remember whether it was in Yoga Journal or it was in Psychology Today. Yoga Journal was sort of a New Age magazine. Psychology Today was different. But the dark side of meditation was that many highly competitive, extremely driven, type A personality people take up meditation because they're so stressed and they're so frantic trying to achieve their ambitions that they take up meditation. And of course, the goal of meditation isn't merely it's not a small goal, it's infinite and it's perfection. So pretty soon the type A people are even crazier because now they have a goal that is literally unattainable, so they can constantly be stressed and fail. And it was actually a more intelligent article than I thought it was going to be because of that. So what I see the devil's trick here, quite a lot of actually, is that and I'll have to deal with the fact that both Swami and Master actually encouraged us to think this way. But the devil's trick I see is that for a lot of people, it actually undermines them. Rather than inspiring them, it undermines them. Because, and I'll speak for myself, intuitively, I know I'm not that free. I'm just not. I'm not even sure if God came to me and offered to free me of all my desires that I would actually say yes. Because they're there, they're attachments. I'm theoretically inclined to want to overcome them, but I'm not at all sure that I really want to overcome them. Do we understand? So a lot of times the prayer is not, help me to overcome this, it's help me to want to overcome it. I've watched in myself in in challenging circumstances that I've had to ask, why am I not letting this go? Because, I mean, I should let it go, but I'm not letting it go. So it's a different question. Why am I not letting this go? And then I find out who I am. I don't just find out who I wish I were, that I could present to some mythical public and show them. This is who I really am. And if these roots are this deep, and even after all my philosophy, I still am holding on. I've joked with you all. I mean, I've told you I'll wait till it finishes for a second. It inevitably happens.
The roots, you've joked with everyone.
Oh yes. You know, that I had to come to accepting what I was holding in my heart that I finally articulated as somebody owes me an apology. And I made it humorous because I learned that from Swamiji. Swamiji would make jokes when nobody was feeling defensive. He would make jokes about serious wrong attitudes so that when you were falling into them, you would remember that you'd been laughing at it and it would be just a tiny bit harder to take it seriously. So when I really understood feelings that were deep inside me, that were deep vrittis of just, because this is my particular karma, I usually think I'm right, and people don't always understand me and they don't listen to me. I have this attachment to my own ideas, which is really stunning. And when people reject my ideas, I feel rejected on a level that's completely out of proportion, but nonetheless, that's how I feel. And often I do turn out to be right, and they didn't listen to me. I mean, there it goes. But it's a deep feeling that I want somebody to tell me, I want somebody to make that up to me. And I don't want to feel that way. But to say I don't want to feel that way is not the same as saying I don't feel that way. So all of this that I'm talking about is, if we're serious about being Jivan Muktas, you have to start. We have to start with where we are. This is not a magic pill. This is not like, oh, you could be a Jivan Mukta in this lifetime. It doesn't mean that I'm just going to sit here and hope to be one. It means that one has to be extremely aggressive and extraordinarily humble. I mean, stunningly humble, so that there is no defense, there's no ego, there's no need to look good, even in the absolute privacy of your meditation room, that exactly who we are, we're perfectly willing to put that in front of God, because it's not going to go away otherwise. Being a Jivan Mukta isn't just like, oh, Master said we can be Jivan Mukta, so at the end of my life I will be. It's because starting in this minute, I'm going to be absolutely fearlessly honest about who I actually am. Because that's the only way I'm ever going to traverse the distance. And once you start doing that, you're on the road. And that's why the idea of whether this is my last incarnation or the next one or the next one or the next one, I mean, there's several reasons why I don't care. And I'll touch several of them, but we're on the road. Coming through the Mumbai traffic, you have kind of a choice. Today it wasn't so bad, but we went out to visit the monks on Wednesday, and we went to see a beautiful waterfall, which caused us to leave about an hour later than we should have, which caused us to be about an hour and a half longer getting home. And there you are. Like, what can you do about it? You all deal with this every day. You have a lot of choices in regard to your consciousness, but very little choice in regard to your circumstances, because they seem to be fixed. So in a very real sense, all the energy we put out until this incarnation, building up, and I was talking all about this on Sunday when those of you were there, building up this persona, we have to put out the same amount of energy to take it apart. And if Master says, in theory, we can do that in one incarnation, that means we have to put out a lot of energy, and that's where the energy goes. It goes into humility and into self-honesty in order to actually transcend the ego. And that's what we're trying to do. And once you're doing that as best you can, what difference does it make whether you say it's going to be next lifetime, this lifetime, next lifetime, the one after, it's not going to, your opinion just doesn't matter a whit. And the only reason, well, let me take it from several levels. Master says you only have to do 1% of what he said, but everyone will take a different 1%, and therefore he had to teach so much. So merely because Master said something, everything he said, of course, is true, but one has to figure out what is practical for me, or what is practical for me today, and then have to think about it. I have seen a certain amount of I can be a Jivan Mukta in this lifetime, and I don't know any of you well enough to put this on you, so I'm just going to speak from people that I know who aren't in this room. I've seen a lot of people use that in a weird way as an excuse for actually really facing who they are, because they hope not to have to face who they are, because it's it takes a lot of strength, to have the self-honesty to just know who we are. Now, of course, you can flip that very easily, because the mere fact that we're trying, makes us, Master said that to, was it Norman or was it to Daniel Boone? And said to him, I don't think I have very good karma, sir. And Master said, it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. So we're angels, we really are. And we're so close to the end, we really are, that quibbling over one lifetime or another seems to me like a quibble. The incentive for it is, why not try as hard as we can? But Master also said that so that we wouldn't just go to sleep. And I know on one or more occasions, Swami also said it, I always feel when he says something like that, sometimes he's talking to one person in the room. I know whenever Swami has said I could become a Jivan Mukta, it has never felt helpful to me. It's always felt to me like, one, it's too confusing. I haven't the foggiest idea what it means to be a Jivan Mukta. I just don't know what it is. I deal with the contrast between myself and Swamiji, and I don't need more pressure. I just don't need more pressure. So I've just decided it doesn't apply to me. And if at the hour of my death I find out it does, I'll say, well, isn't that a surprise? And I rehearse the hour of my death. I rehearse it actually quite a lot. Swamiji suggests every night you make a bonfire of all your attachments, which I simply can't do. It was just insincere. I could build that bonfire, but I'd be stashing a lot of stuff behind me. I'd just be very selectively throwing things into it, stuffing the rest of them, into my pockets. So I don't have the strength. I just don't have the strength to do it. But what I have rehearsed is the hour of my death, because I have been privileged to be with a number of yogis when they've died. So I know exactly what an Ananda deathbed scene looks like. I really do. You have all the friends around. Sometimes they're being serious. Sometimes they're just talking about what kind of pizza to order. Sometimes they get bored. Sometimes they're talking really seriously to you. Sometimes they're just making jokes about your life. Lots of people come in and out. Cell phones go off. People are doing business off to the side. I know the whole picture. Meanwhile, somebody's dying. And the person who's dying is gradually getting more and more gaunt, and they kind of interact for a while, and then they stop interacting. And I've seen it. They're still conscious, but they don't care that much anymore. And every so often they smile and something like that. So I put myself there a lot.
But why would they do that?
Why
would it be so casual?
Well, because one, yogis are not afraid of death. And so they don't feel that they're not anxious.
Still, the soul is leaving this world. Right?
Well, now, I'm talking about the long cycle. Seriously, I've been through cycles that were either days or a couple of weeks. And you just can't maintain, that kind of pious solemnity for the whole time. And if the person were awake and interacting with you, they wouldn't expect you to be pious. They would expect you to be natural. So in those situations that I've been, when Paula was dying, I wrote up her story I told it in Finding Happiness. And I also wrote it up in one book I wrote. And I was on vacation, and Paula became ill, and we'd heard that she was in the hospital, and we didn't know whether she was living or not. We landed at a certain airport and needed to know whether we should go to find her. So this, Paula was Arjuna's sister, Arjuna and Sisi. That was his sister. So we called up and we said, we're here, at the airport, what's going on? He says, Asha, Arjuna, Asha, Paul's been dying to see you. And then there's this huge laughter in the room. No, Arjuna said, Paul's been not dying to see you. But why not? Why not? Because we're all still just who we've always been. Somebody's on their way. But of course, by the time she actually left her body, it was so sacred. It was so serious. We were all totally with her. And when I was with Tushti, whom some of you knew from here, when she finally died, there was only one person with her. But over the several weeks that I was there, 3 or 4 times, we really thought she was leaving her body. Partly because the energy just became so elevated and magnificent, and we were totally serious and with her. But then she was such a yogi, and she was hardly breathing. There's this tiny little pulse, and then every so often like that, and then all of a sudden her diaphragm would move, and this huge yogic breath would come, and she would just be back. Who knew why? And we'd laugh. There was nothing else to do, and then just wait and go through the cycle again. So even though it might seem like inappropriate to you, I know that it's not. And so therefore, when I was in seclusion actually writing the book, that's what I would do every night. I would just rehearse my death. Because why not try? And also in that, who am I going to have to apologize to? Who do I hope is going to come and apologize to me? What kind of phone calls am I going to have to make? What am I going to have to say? Who am I not clean with at this point? If you want to be a Jivan Mukta, that's what you have to do. Because when you die, you can't take any of it with you. When Paula died, we had what we called her passing party. It lasted 3 days. And part of what she did is she called everybody to come see her who was nearby and called everyone else on the phone. And she had one last altercation with this one woman that she'd never resolved, because the woman had become absolutely impossible, and Paula had to fire her from a job. And she deserved to be fired, but she never admitted that she deserved to be fired, and remained angry at Paula for 10 years. And Paula could never make peace with it. So Paula calls her up on the phone, and everybody knows that Paula's dying. Paula says, I've always regretted what happened between us, that it caused such a separation in our friendship. Something like words to that effect. Absolute truth. She didn't say I was right and you were wrong. She didn't say you were right and I was wrong. She said, I've always regretted what happened between us. She said, and Paula had a very colloquial way of speaking, I'd like to think we're both big enough gals to put it behind us. She said, what do you think? Like that. And she just melted all the antagonism, told the absolute truth, but took away the animosity. Because I think Paula was free. And then after that one, well, she wanted a cup of coffee, because she'd had cancer for 3 years, she'd had cancer 3 times, and everybody was always trying to get her to stop drinking coffee, thinking that she would live if she didn't drink coffee. She would never stop drinking coffee, and I don't think coffee killed her. But she wanted coffee. So one of her friends went out and got her a cup of coffee. She couldn't even drink. She just actually put a swab in, literally, would taste it. Paula's like, she's leaving. She's just going like this. Someone tries to take the coffee out of her hand. She closes her hand. She says, I'm not done with it. Coffee had been a real issue in her life. She loved it. Everyone was always getting her to stop. She wouldn't stop. And then a couple of hours later, she said, okay. And she let it go like that. So we said, Paula, is there anything left? And there was this man who was known as PJ, and he'd actually died a few years before. And she had been a good friend of his. But I don't know what had happened between them. They'd had there was no romance. It was just friendship. But so they'd had something where they'd had a falling out. Paula, is there anyone left? Is there anything left that you have that you need to finish? Well, she said, once I was so mad at PJ that he sent me a rose bush and I waited a whole month to plant it. We all looked at each other like, oh my God, please, when I die, let that be the only thing that's left. You know, that I left a rose bush in a pot for an extra month. I said, well, Paula, you know, PJ's gone, so you're going to have to settle it with him on the other side. She said, I think we can. But that's what it looks like. Okay? So how close can we come to that? I mean, Swami actually said, because Paula died completely consciously, she had been using the supplemental oxygen. We did this little ceremony with Whispers from Eternity. There were like 30 people. She had everybody there with her. And like at midnight, she took the oxygen, just very quietly. She didn't say anything. She just took it out like that. And I saw it because I tend to notice. I thought, look at that. Because she didn't say anything. She just took it out. And a couple of hours later, I don't exactly know how, but we all woke up. And we knew she was dying. Did she tell us? Can't really remember. Maybe her breathing changed. When people begin to die, when normally at the beginning when people are dying, all their energy is on the inhalation because they're trying to stay in their body. And if you're ever with anyone who's dying, there'll be a point where all of a sudden all the energy is on the exhalation. It's very dramatic because they're trying to get out because the last breath is an exhalation. So what must have happened is we must have heard that shift. And all of a sudden all the energy was getting out. And so she would exhale and then we'd all wait. And then she'd inhale again. And then she said, this is very hard, you have to help me. And I believe then she said, God, Christ, Guru. And Jyotish, I believe, was in the room and we all started, he started chanting Om and we all started chanting Om. And then a few minutes later, she left. I mean, absolutely consciously, even up to the point of knowing now is the moment. Swami said at her astral ascension, he said, you don't die like that unless you're free. You know, with that much conscious will. So I watched her do it. I know what it's like. But when she got cancer the second time, she said to me, Asha, I don't have the luxury of a single negative thought. She said, I'm getting cancer for the second time. She said like that. I said, Paula, you're the sweetest person I know, but if you think there's room for improvement, go ahead. Oh yeah, she said, there's lots I could improve on. Oh, she was just like a little girl. You would never have picked her out of the crowd. But that's what it looks like to be free. So how close are we? And how close can we come? That's what it takes. And there's a strange, and this is the other part of it. Hello.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Happy to have you come in. The other part of it is, and this is complex. We think spiritual freedom comes by having an aversion to this world. But having an aversion to this world is not quite the same as vairagya. You know, vairagya is much more subtle. And it was very interesting at the very end of Swamiji's life when he wrote what became known as the Easter letter, which he put out just a few weeks before he passed. He commented that all his life he'd felt like this world was not his home, and he always wanted to be somewhere else. And you know, you think, oh, that's a marvelous spiritual attitude, isn't it, to want to be somewhere else? But he said, now I realize that God is everywhere. And so even though he simultaneously said that nothing in this world interested him, that he'd always been an enthusiastic person, now he had no enthusiasm, at the same time, he became indifferent as to where he was and whether he was liberated. Because even to push that much against where God puts you is to hold something that we can pretend is an actual desire for liberation, but is also a desire to be rescued, which is not the same. Because if we wish to be rescued, that means we have an aversion. So detachment and aversion are not the same things. So it's very subtle, because we can't be craving the things of this world either, but too much rejection of them is actually just pushing it to the other side, because we haven't yet transcended this experience. We have to transcend the experience. We have to be able to see God everywhere. That's what it is to be free. And then, of course, we can be wherever we're supposed to be. But the other side of it, you see, is the masters commit themselves to this world. You know, I mean, it was with Swamiji, one of the things that was very hard for me at the beginning is that I thought it was spiritual to, in some quiet way, not give a damn. And that's sort of how I felt. I just kind of thought that I just shouldn't care that much about much of anything, which included master's work. And so I prided myself when I came to Ananda, to the community, to be with Swami. I was going to learn from Swamiji. I was going to become a spiritual person from Swami. And he was building a community, and that was kind of cute, you know. But I was there just to learn from Swami. And I went on like that for quite some time. I mean, I worked hard, I had fun, I liked to work, I liked to do things. So it wasn't like I just sat on the sideline and sneered. But inside of me, I really didn't care, because I thought it wasn't important. And then one day, I was actually riding in the back of the car. Swami was probably driving, maybe Seva was driving. We were driving through the community, and I'm looking at these, you know, what then was about 700 acres of land that we're just, you know, we're scratching out of the mud to just get anything going. It was an incredibly huge project, and every little tiny thing was a victory. You know, you put up one shack that you can put the goats in, and it was an incredible victory. And so I was noticing, you know, that there was a shack here and there was a shack there, and some little tiny thing was happening. And I realized how Swami was just pouring out his life's blood to make this community work. And it crossed my mind that here I was trying to be like him, and I was too spiritual to actually commit myself the way he had committed himself. And I began to think that something was really off inside of me. And so that's also been the factor of how I've related to whether or not I'm going to get free in this lifetime. I came here, Swami came to help Master, and I came to help Swami. And I mean, that to me, that's what I'm about. If I also get liberated in the meantime, just fine. I kind of consider it their problem. I always have. I really, it's like if they want to liberate me, then great, go right ahead. But what I do know what Master and Swamiji have given me. And then I look at what matters to them. You see? It's like Master gave his life for this work, Swamiji gave his life for this work. I mean, that's why I wrote 220,000 words about how Swami gave his life to build this work. Because it's a clue. It's like a map. Maybe you'll notice. This is what it looks like to be a Jivan Mukta. It doesn't look like, oh, what do I care? It looks like I will martyr myself. I will overcome every personal resistance to do this for Master. And I realized I don't serve Master by just sitting back and thinking about how free I can get. I serve Master by behaving like he did. I mean, how do you serve your friend? Your friend has a big problem. You don't just stay home and say, call me when it's over and we'll go to the movies. You know, like you dive in and do everything you can to make it work for them. So our guru, it's like what matters to him? You can say, oh, what matters to him is my liberation. Yeah, but how do we even know what it is to be a spiritual person? That's what Swamiji did for me. I didn't have any idea what it was to be a spiritual person. And so I work backwards from the way he behaves. Instead of working from what I might think, I work from the way he behaves. And I think, you know, when I really allowed myself to look at it, I realized I was just coasting. I was just playing at being a devotee. I mean, that's what it looks like, to give your life for it for the sake of others. You all don't do the Festival of Light every week in India, although whenever I get a chance I campaign for you to do it, because it is so powerfully full of divine teaching that will constantly come back to you. And part of the Festival of Light is that 4 stages of spiritual growth are described. And the 4th and last stage, greater can no love be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death for the salvation of mankind. Such ever has been the sacrifice of the great masters for the world. Here then is the 4th and last stage of the soul's long journey. Oh, wow, wait a minute. The 4th and last stage is the willingness to sacrifice everything, including your own freedom, for the salvation of mankind. This is how a master behaves. So every time I read that, I think, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And this is how I get to freedom. This is the same as how can I become a Jivan Mukta. It's I have to behave as they behave. So I have become, I'm just passionate about Master's work. I'm incredibly ambitious for Master's work. I want all hands on deck for Master's work, because that's how we're going to get there. We're not a path where we get to go off to the Himalayas. This is here you all are in Mumbai. These people have been here for 12 months. There was an effort being made ahead of time, but we have a long way to go, before Master's work, the roots, the seed is just barely planted, and who's going to till the field? And it isn't just a question of helicoptering in as I do and declaiming. Mailings have to be done, phone calls have to be made, rooms have to be cleaned, money has to be raised, money has to be given. It's like top to bottom. I was so fortunate because I just walked onto a big messy piece of land and there was nothing for us to do. We just, you either grew food, cooked it, or you built buildings. That was just about all that there was. One of us got to write books, and that was, there was one adult, the rest of us were just, but it was so much fun. And I got to do it again in Palo Alto. We just came there and just like, how are we going to make this happen? And who's going to make it happen? And all hands on deck. But to me, that's the pathway to liberation, because I need to become like Swamiji and Master. And golly, how did they spend their lives? And did that give them freedom? In Patanjali, in the commentary that Swami has on Patanjali, I'll just say 2 more things and then I'll stop. He actually says, the sentence is this plain: the best way to overcome the ego is through selfless service. And you want him to say the best way to overcome the ego is by renouncing everything and going into my meditation room and doing Kriya, but that's not what he says. Because when we go in, we tend to bring too much of ourselves with us. And we have to, someone was talking earlier, you were talking about all the other people. And you were talking about remodeling your apartment and all the other people. That's where it usually happens for us. And even the question that you asked, there is no difference between the business that you do in the meditation room. And it's not, how do I get back to my meditation? How can I erase the sense of difference between the 2 realities? Because that's how the masters live. They don't live divided up. In fact, very specifically, Swamiji, he met this man in Canada who said exactly that same thing to him. And Swamiji was very distressed by that, because he said the majority of this man's life is not in his meditation room. So how can that much of his life be outside of his spiritual life? We have to really think about it completely differently. Many of you do not have the freedom that I have, or Shurjo and Narayani have, to really dedicate all our time to it. But everybody can do something, and that's why I talk about tithing and things like that. Just finding a way to serve, because that's the best way to overcome the ego. And not serve, this is what I want to do, serve, but serve what is needed. How can I serve? Greater love can there be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death. Well, that's not usually what's asked of us. It's not usually pain and death. We're not usually going to be crucified. But we get to do a lot of stuff that, we have to make fun because it may not necessarily be. But okay, and then the last part of it was, and I searched through Swami's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and I just can't find this paragraph, but I know for certain it's in there, and I'll have to find it. Because I remember when he wrote the manuscript, he commented on one of the stanzas, and what he said was, and it's in so many words, you know, I know people talk about being a Jivan Mukta in one lifetime, but friends, don't even think about it. Just love God. And he didn't say, don't achieve it. He said, don't think about it, just love God. And when I read it, I said, sir, this has always been my philosophy, and some of my friends get down on me for this. He said, just love God. The rest of it's in his hands. Because we think that self-realization is self-perfection. But self-realization is self-forgetfulness, which is completely different. So all of our ideas about who I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to do and what I have to give and how I'm supposed to give it, that's all just self-preoccupation. Self-forgetfulness. There's just no self to even worry about. It's how can I serve, how can I give, how can I love? Because then when you're on your deathbed, it's easy to let go, because that's all you've ever thought about. Now God is calling you out of your body. It's the same method. Does that make sense?
Yes. Just theoretically, is it possible to hold on to all your desires, all your likes and dislikes, and just through your kriyas and through your devotion still become Jeevan?
You're asking all the hidden questions of the group.
Just theoretically.
Just merely theoretical. There might be a devotee somewhere who really wonders about this. Not me, of course, but well, let me just try to think about it. You know, what you're actually asking, because you have a way of asking a question that you don't know you're asking. What you're actually asking is, does spiritual progress feel like a loss or a gain?
Like
A loss or a gain? Because the idea that you want to hold on to these things and still become free is because subconsciously one feels like I'm going to lose if I give them up. And that's actually one of the reasons why the whole who am I really is such an important question. Because the question doesn't exist. It's actually oxymoronic, what you've asked, because attachments, desires, and so on are a vibration of consciousness. And it's not like they're ripped out of our hands, although sometimes they're ripped out of our hands, but our vibration changes. And if we're not interested anymore, we don't even remember that they're there. So as your vibration rises, and Kriya will help raise your vibration, but if Kriya works at all, your vibration will change. And when your vibration changes, that which looked attractive to you won't be attractive. That which your mind was drawn to, you'll forget that it exists. So it won't be this, oh, I have to advance. Goodbye, you know? It's that you won't even think of them anymore. They cease to exist for you because you've become someone else, completely someone else. And that's how real spiritual progress happens. Real spiritual progress is not, oh, I wish I could have it, but I have to let it go. And that's sort of why this whole discussion, I think, leads people into a state of confusion, because they start figuring, well, if I'm going to be Jivan Mukta, I've got to give up this. Okay, I'll give up this. And all right, now I have to give up this. But actually, we're not giving up anything. We're just creating a whole new series of tensions. Whereas if we actually love and serve and want to emulate and give back to what's been given to us, I mean, that's how I feel about Swamiji. If I can do anything to advance the cause for which he gave his life, which was very important to him, because it was very important, because Master asked it of him. It was his promise to Master. If I can help him keep his promise to Master, then I will feel that I have said thank you in a way that really matters. Because otherwise I've only taken from him. And that's what I realized in that car. This man gives everything to me, and I'm happily taking it. And what I give back is a cup of tea every now and then. It just did not feel imbalanced to me. And so I'm just trying to exercise the laws of gratitude, if nothing else. And Master also talked about the ideal relationship between disciple and guru is friendship, because it's a freely given relationship, and it's based on a shared understanding of values and what we're doing. That's what Jesus said to his disciples. You call me master, I call you friend. And then he specifically said, the servant, does what his master asks, but the servant's heart belongs to his village. And he just does what his master asks. It never becomes his cause. But a friend embraces as his own, friend to friend. And that's what we as disciples need to do. It's not Swami's work, it's not Master's work, it's mine. In America, we had the luxury, we had the incredible gift of going through 12 years of litigation, where we had to sacrifice time and an enormous amount of money, $13 million, which was raised from about 300 people who almost all live below the poverty level in America. But we just did it. We just gave up everything because they were trying to take away our right to serve Master. And so we actually got to find out how important that was to us. Which, if it's just there and you just think it's yours, you don't think about it. But when somebody really tries to take it away from you, then all of a sudden you have to stop and ask. I mean, we entered litigation as children and came out as adults because we had to stand for our own discipleship. It was a great blessing. It was a tapasya, but it was a great blessing, which concerns me, because if other people don't get that same opportunity, how will you, not how will the work grow, but how will you grow?
But at Ananda 50th, I saw all majority of you have met Swamiji, and your energy, your joy, your attunement, everything was like, and we all are trying to
that's a very good question.
Be there.
No, that is a question. I've been contemplating that question for years. Even when Swamiji was still living, I've had a unique life. And so is the result of my life replicable without the circumstances of my life? I mean, just start there, even before Swami died, because the access I had to him was gone. It just wasn't available. Narayani and Shurjil moved into it. A few other people did. But still, it was this many people. So there's several answers to that question. Let me just stop for a minute and think. Swamiji himself only knew Master for 3.5 years, and almost no one else at Ananda, virtually no one else, ever met Master. And yet, we have a whole community of people who are devoted to a guru they've never met. Many people are devoted to Babaji, a guru you don't even have a photograph of him, and yet somehow or another that presence lives within you, doesn't it? And somehow or another, the fact of physical absence and lack of personal contact doesn't really seem to be an obstacle, does it? Somehow or another, either from the testimony of those who knew, from the books that were written, from the vibration that comes into one's own heart, one crosses over that time and space obstacle. Christianity was primarily created by St. Paul. St. Paul never met Jesus. St. Paul did have a vision of Jesus when he was on the road going out to kill Jesus' followers, which was his job at that time. Jesus appeared to him and said, maybe this is a bad idea, maybe you're fighting on the wrong side. Paul became convinced it was the testimony of Paul that awakened the world to the fact of Jesus. There would be no Christianity if there hadn't been Paul, and Paul was not a direct disciple. He was an enemy of Jesus until he converted. So you have to start with the fact that it's there, that the power is there. St. Francis never met Jesus. Padre Pio never met Jesus. Mother Teresa of Calcutta never met Jesus. And not one of them for a moment thinks that that's the least obstacle. There was a a monk at SRF, Brother Turiyananda. He was a mighty, marvelous man. He never met Master. He was not a direct disciple. He came to SRF through Swamiji, actually. And he was always a bit of a rebel within SRF and very outspoken. And somebody came to Master. There are two stories I love. When Ronald Reagan was president of the United States, his daughter was a yoga teacher in Los Angeles. This was like so exciting to all of us. And she apparently went to the Lake Shrine one time where he was the minister. And she introduced herself as whatever her name was, Patty Reagan, I think was her name, or something like that. And she introduced herself and said, I'm so-and-so. My father is president of the United States. Turiyananda said, I'm Brother Turiyananda. My father is Lord of the Universe. So that was so fantastic. But the other one was, someone came to him and says, brother, I really need a living guru. I don't see how I can be Master's disciple. I need a living guru. And Turiyananda, just so, like this, he said, Master is living. It's you who are dead. Which is true. It's you who are dead. Yeah. So, that is the question. And here's one more thing about it. It's like, just let me pause for just a second and find this. It's like these advanced souls incarnate a lot more often than we do. Because we're compelled by our karma, and they just come in every once in a while when they have a job to do in order to help us. I talked to Swami. He was saying, once this is over, I'm not coming back. And then he sort of said, except to help all of you. I said, well, that's why you're here this time, isn't it? Swami said, well, there is that. Sort of like, And, so we have lots of incarnations. We will, just common sense says, we have lots of incarnations in which our connection to the source, but see, that doesn't mean that we're just all on our own. The connection to the source goes in a line like this, It goes through Narayani and Shurjo, it goes through Jyotish and Devi, and then after Jyotish and Devi are gone, after I'm gone, presumably these two will live a little longer, and others who are younger, who've known Swamiji, and they'll pass the spirit on to others. And so whether or not you have that spirit is entirely up to you. The resources are there, the music, the videos, the books, the living presence. It's just there. And it just depends on how important it is to you, whether or not you find it, how much you attune yourself, how much you dilute your attunement with other influences, how one-pointed you are in your concentration, whether or not you want to be a Jivan Mukta. It's like if this is your path and this is your lineage, and Master, within Master's family, there are many smaller families. I've met Dayamata probably more times than most SRF members did, always in terrible circumstances, depositions, courtrooms, things like that. But even then, with all due respect, I never felt anything from her. But other people absolutely feel about her the way I feel about Swamiji, because they belong to her. They belong to her. I belong to Swamiji. Some people belong to Mr. Black. Gyanamata had her disciples. Rajasi had his. We're little families within families. And so if we want to grow, we have to see where we are, and we have to apply ourselves to it. Nothing is automatic. That's the good news about the path. It's that it's all in our hands. And that's the other news about this path. Nothing is automatic. You can't just, a comedian in America said, imagining that sitting in church will make you a Christian is like going into your garage and thinking it will make you a car. And that's about what it is. You can sign up and take all the initiations you want and go 1, 2, 3, 4, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 15. You can do it all and have nothing, because it doesn't matter. You can do none of it and have everything, although I advise you to learn from what you can learn. But we either receive it or we don't, which is the good news, because it's all in our hands. And yeah, it's different. And I have to sit back with a lot of you and just say, tell me about it. Because I don't know. I had different karma, so you tell me about it. And a lot of people have told me about how real Swamiji has become to them. Just as people tell me how real Master has become to them. And I've been very pleased. And in fact, since Swamiji's passing, many people have told me, and I know this is true, he's become more accessible. His body was a limitation, and now it's not there anymore. And so many people have told me, since he passed, he's more real to them than he ever was, even when they met him. And again, I just have to say, oh, how interesting. We all had to learn. I had to learn. But he withdrew a lot toward the end. At the same time that Narayani and Shurja were with him all the time, a lot of the rest of us were farther away. He stopped telephoning, he stopped emailing, he didn't travel quite as much. So we've all had to learn. But I add my testimony to those of all the others. Time and space is no obstacle. I'm an obstacle. I'm a serious obstacle, but time and space is not.
Ashaji, you spoke about how if we want to be a Jivan Mukta, we need to have a clean record for most part of it. In terms of, how you gave Paula's example, if there was anyone whom she had to resolve a conflict with or anything. And Swamiji was able to achieve that state of liberation despite his conflict with SRF.
Oh, he transcended it personally. The mere fact that he persevered in trying to influence them virtually to the end of his life was because he felt responsible for Master's work. There was nothing personal. In fact, it's a great mistake to even begin to think that anything that happened there was personal. It was a battle for the future of Master's mission in the world. And Swamiji felt profoundly responsible, and he never accepted that he was kicked out of SRF. As he often said, it takes two to make a divorce. They divorced him, he never felt he was divorced. To the end of his life, he felt responsible for SRF. And he also felt that he was the only living person who could speak especially to Jivan Mukta. And he felt that there were things that Master wanted her to know. Now, she did not feel that way about him, but he felt that way about her. But it wasn't personal, it was friendship. It was the opposite of personal. And he just kept trying to the very end. And also, much of what he did was for the historical record. Much of what he did was for the sake of those who want to understand in principle later. So much of what he did was all about the principles that are represented by SRF and Ananda, the principles that were represented by his expulsion and the decisions that were made around that. All those are extremely interesting, both theological and organizational issues. At one point, he called us all together, the community leaders, to talk about whether or not we could find whether or not we needed to keep talking about SRF. I think we were still in litigation, so it wasn't an option. But he said, but there's so many important lessons to be learned. He said, and they're a perfect example of the usual organizational route, which he really wanted to save Ananda from. And they are. And they're a perfect example of certain theological decisions. Most people don't understand that it's theological, and I'll summarize it ever so briefly. The Catholic Church made a certain choice, which was Peter was the first pope, and authority and understanding of Jesus' teachings have been passed down in unbroken succession from Peter through a series of popes. The fact that at different times there were several popes, and things like that is just kind of brushed over. If you write history, you can just forget. And authority comes through institutional authority. We declare what's true. And then it just comes down the line like this. So SRF has taken a very similar approach. Jivan Mukta's entire justification was, I was with him, and don't you think I ought to know? That was her answer every time. Swami would say, well, Master said this, if you think about it like this, it means this, if you think about it like this, it means that, and then on the other hand, here's the option, and if you do this, this will happen. He trained us to think. And he never said, I was with Master, I ought to know. He said, Master said this, so he taught us to think. And his entire relationship to us was every disciple has an equal potential to be in tune with the Guru. Every disciple has an equal potential to understand, even in a new way, what the Guru says. The SRF point of view is that the board of directors knows. I mean, in a conversation with an SRF member about the lawsuit, I said something about, what they were doing, and the person said back to me, well, if the board of directors thinks it's a good idea, that's fine with me. I said, it's millions of dollars of the money that you all have donated. If the board of directors thinks that's fine with me. I just said, okay, we were trained differently. But that was, it's a theological difference. And there's great comfort in joining the monastery and knowing where you stand. And also, for a lot of people spiritually, it's a great idea because you can forget everything. You can completely turn your back on all worldly concerns and just concentrate on your relationship with God. So it's not wrong, it's just different. But Swami felt it was a very important difference because we're going up into Dwapar, and all of this man was a Kali Yuga man. But there was nothing in Swamiji. Narayani can speak to that, and she wrote about that in her book.
So as long as you've transcended that, it wouldn't matter what the other person thinks of you. That wouldn't matter to you.
Oh no, once you're free, they have to work out the karma, but not with you. And Swamiji had to fight for that, but he won that battle really early. Yeah. And many people didn't understand that, because you see, he remained intense, because he was determined to serve Master's work. And most people just couldn't even begin to imagine how selfless that commitment was. So they would just think it was personal. It was never personal. It was that I have this commission from Master, I understand his work, I feel that they don't understand it. I was vice president, I was head of the monks. They removed me, I never removed myself. I mean, I actually saw him on several occasions with SRF monks, correcting them. If I were still in the work, I would be your superior. And then he would tell them something he felt they needed to know. They didn't like it, but I loved it. And Swami was just being completely sincere. Basically, who else is going to tell you if I don't do it? And he didn't mind what people thought of him. It just didn't make any difference to him. Well, I turned out I had a lot to say. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions before we... Anything else?
Just speaking of SRF and the monks, there was a really fun story that Daniel Boone shared. They released a video of him speaking at the 93 celebration, the centenary.
Uh-huh.
And so he shares a story that he was one of the monks and Master sort of had gone for a trip, and he came back to the monastery, and then he said, oh boys, come, I'm going to have a meal with you or something. So he basically went down into the basement, which is where the monastery was. And he said, what do you have to eat here? So then they grabbed some cereal or milk or something like that, and then Master started having that. All the monks were sort of just watching Master. And then Master also says, do you have any Tabasco here? So they pull out this Tabasco sauce, he sort of on the spoon, and then Master sips that, tastes that. And then all the monks are watching very intently to see how Master is going to react. And then Master says to the monk, he says, okay boys, line up now.
Put Tabasco in there.
Then he made everyone taste Tabasco sauce. So it was so sweet. It was so, it was just so natural and so...
That's what Swamiji always tells us. He said, much has been lost in the way Master has been presented. He said Swami actually said to me once, he said, I've never been able to put this in a book, he said, because I just don't know how to put it. He said, but Master was so adorable. He said he was just so completely charming. He wasn't at all this sort of stern disciplinarian or this distant otherworldly figure. He said he was just absolutely lovable and so delightful and just so at ease. That's what Swamiji was like. He was just so completely natural. There was just no pretense about him at all. We could laugh about anything. He was the first to laugh. And he said Master was just the same. When Swamiji finally obtained the first few recordings of Master, SRF had this whole archive full, but they weren't releasing any of them. must have been in the 80s, he got a few tapes from this woman in Europe who'd gotten them from Dr. Lewis. And we released them, we published them. And it was Master just just sitting around a living room, just chatting. And most of what SRB put out at that point was, exhorting like this. And Swami said, yes, Master did that sometimes, but mostly he said he was very fatherly. He was just very warm and very fatherly. And Swami was so pleased with these recordings because he said, this is Master as I knew him, where he just sat in the living room and talked with us. And so it was because we published those recordings that SRF started publishing recordings. I mean, Ananda Swami led SRF in many, many areas. I mean, just took initiative and then they were forced to follow. So, but to just really feel and know what he was like and not have these two-dimensional pictures, which leave us stranded. We don't know how to relate to not being human. So, did that help, or did it make it worse? I hope it didn't make it worse. You'll be glad to see the back of me if we did.
That was so helpful. Thank you.
Good, I'm glad. And maybe we'll all be free. Maybe when we all cross over, we'll just discover that we're much more advanced than we think we are. Wouldn't that be a nice surprise? I'm for it. I want it to be registered. I don't object. I've often said, I want to, when I'm born, I hope, assuming I have another body, that everyone says about me, she was never a child, she was always an old woman. I just want to carry over the consciousness that I have now, the seriousness, what I understand. I don't want to waste any time being a child. My friend Tandava wrote this wonderful poem for me, just describing the little girl that I might be and how everybody relates to her and how her toddling steps are the same as an old woman's toddling steps. It was very sweet because he captured exactly what I felt, which is I'll be happy, but I just want to be serious. I don't want to waste time. So in that sense, why not? Let's get on.
Let's get on with it then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.